Have you noticed your plants are sending out big, thick stalks and shoots and starting to flower? What's up with that? In this video, I'm going to be talking about why plants bolt and what you can do to either prevent it, slow it, or what to do if it happens. Hi, my name is Landon Gilfillan with Pepper and Pine Garden Design, and let's talk about why your plants bolt and what to do about it. So this plant you're looking at here is a gorgeous bolted mustard plant. This past week and a half, we've had some really high temperatures here in Southwest Michigan. We went from really nice 70-degree days to a whole week in the 90s. And that stress, that heat stress, basically told these plants it was time to go into survival mode. And that's basically what bolting is. The word bolting came from the fact that whenever these plants go to flower, and this can happen with any number of plants, you see it on a lot of your greens, like your mustards, your lettuces, your collards, kale sometimes, Swiss chard sometimes, herbs like cilantro and parsley, spinach, arugula. Those are things that will bolt quite easily, although all your vegetables can bolt at some point or another. Not necessarily your fruiting plants, your vegetables and your greens. So bolting came from whenever this thick center stalk right here really starts to send up a tall shoot in like a week's time. So you have your greens that look like this, right? That are producing all these lovely leaves. And then all of a sudden out of the center of it will come up this really thick stalk. And then eventually within like days, it'll send out its flowers, which is where the seeds come from. As an example, this mustard plant here is much slower to bolt than a lot of my other mustard plants that have completely flowered here in the past week. This is what my plant has looked like. But if you see here, you can see a flower starting to form, which is telling me that this guy is about to bolt. Its neighbor here has already bolted. And do you see the difference in this plant and this plant? This one is still pretty much sitting on the ground. This one has sent up its center stalk from the ground and is growing taller and is flowering. And those are the signs that you're looking for that your plant is bolting. You can see this one here. This was all on the ground. All these greens I was harvesting from the ground has now grown tall and has multiple stems sending out flowers. Same with this one. This is what I was harvesting, and then it sent out these stalks right here with flowers on it. That is what we mean when we say bolting. The center stalk, or maybe multiple stalks, are bolting up from the ground and sending out the flowers for seed. Why do they do this? Well, it's for survival. If the plant is sensing any sort of stress, which in this case was heat, there was a very drastic change in temperature. These plants, for the most part, like cooler weather in the 70s and below. And the minute it starts reaching into the 80s and definitely the 90s, these plants are like, we're done. We need to survive. We're gonna die in this heat. So they send up that center stalk, which is eventually going to produce the flowers, which are eventually going to produce the seeds, which will they'll fall on the ground and produce another plant. So it's their way of surviving. It's what the information that is instinctively in these plants that were given to these plants, what they're supposed to do in certain instances to survive. Bolting can also happen from other sorts of stresses, whether they're not getting the nutrition they need in the soil, the nutrients, whether they're experiencing a drought, they're needing more water, maybe they're having pest pressure. Any sort of stress can cause a plant like this to bolt. Now, you're not going to see your fruiting plants like tomatoes and peppers and zucchinis bolt the way you see your vegetable plants bolt. So what do you do to prevent or slow this down? Well, sometimes you just can't. Sometimes it happens so fast you can't catch it. If you are able to catch it, like I did here on this mustard plant, I can just prick off that center stalk and the flower, and that'll help slow the bolting down and will encourage it to continue to send out leaves from the sides. But sometimes when it's already in that mode of survival, it's just going to continue to bolt. And I've seen that happen a lot of times with cilantro in particular. I just keep removing the flowers, but it just keeps sending out more. At the same time, if I do that with cilantro, it might also send out some more greens from the sides. And that's what I'm seeing in my cilantro in the back in my green stalk. This is the green stalk planter right here. And this is my cilantro. I have a lot of it and it's still doing pretty well. It's actually pretty thick looking, but you can see here it's developed that thick center stalk. And right here are the small little flowers that it's trying to send out. So I just kind of keep pricking those off, and don't throw those away. You can actually still use those to flavor your guacamole or whatever you use it for. It still has the nice cilantro flavor. But very soon, if this thing keeps bolting, the flavor is definitely going to turn more of a soapy flavor than a cilantro flavor. And at that point, the plant's pretty much done. But as you can see, I've been pricking off that center stalk, and right here is where I see some new growth coming off the stalk. So it is telling itself to produce more branches in here, and hopefully I can keep this plant going. But at some point it's going to be done, and I won't be able to get the really nice cilantro flavor that I want from this plant, which is why I've gone ahead and sown some more cilantro seeds in the same pocket here, so that hopefully by the time this one's finishing, I have some new plants growing. So other than just pricking off the flower and that stalk and trying to slow down the bolting process, the other thing that you really just have to pay attention to is good planning. When do these plants really want to be in the garden? When do they really thrive? And specifically, I'm talking temperatures. Generally, the plants that like to bolt quickly don't like temperatures above 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Right when it starts hitting those 80s and definitely the 90s is when they're going to want to go into survival mode. So knowing when you're starting these plants, trying to maximize the season or the time of year where you have them out in the garden, that's going to be your best bet for preventing bolting. And a lot of these plants that bolt, you can start again in like late July or early August, depending on how long it takes them to mature. And you can have them in the fall when it's a lot cooler, or the end of the summer season when it starts cooling down. I know here in Michigan, it really starts cooling down in August. So I can be starting these things in July, and by the time they're ready to go in the garden, it's already going to have temperatures in the range that they like. So it really comes down to good planning. So yes, you can stave them off a little bit, but again, good planning is what's going to be your best bet for preventing bolting. Other than that, just enjoy these beautiful flowers that these plants produce. I love letting a lot of my plants go to flower or go to seed because they produce just this lovely little flowers. So this is a mustard, has a lovely yellow flower. When I let my radishes bolt, they usually produce like a pink or a purple flower. And the cilantro flower looks a lot like Queen Anne's lace and dill. They're in the same family, so that makes sense. So it brings the pollinators to the garden. It's a good thing. I definitely would not pull up your plant unless you have a lot of them. I had a lot of mustard plants in my other garden and in this garden, so I pulled up a good amount of them, but I left some of them, again, just to bring beauty to the garden and bring the pollinators to the garden. And eventually, when these flowers go to seed, they'll reseed the ground, and if I want them to, they can have new plants in the fall or next year. And I can tell you from experience that dill and cilantro in particular reseed really well. And you can very much plan on having a lifetime supply of dill and cilantro in your garden if you let those plants go to seed. So I hope this video has been helpful in helping you understand the process of bolting, why it happens, and what you can do to either slow it down or just enjoy the process. If this video has been helpful to you, please consider subscribing to my channel or sharing it with someone you think it might be helpful to. And otherwise, my name is Landon Gilfillan with Pepper and Pine Garden Design, growing gardeners and their gardens, and I'll see you in the next video.